Hi, my name's Linda, and I'm an addict.
Hi, Linda.
And I'm actually from Topeka, Kansas. For some reason, everybody always thought I was from Wichita. Anyway, and I think my story's in editions 2 through 5. So anyway, I'm just really glad to be here. I've got to see Chris and Boyd's presentation, like read through it, but it was so nice to have them actually present it and to be able to hear the clips of all these people that I have known and loved all these years. And you know, they may not be with us, but they're still here with us in spirit. And talking about the sacrifice, Jim Nichols selling his motorcycle so his wife Donna could go to Ohio. I was one of the people that went with her and that group to Ohio. So I was at the first World Literature Conference in Wichita, and I got involved with the literature committee. I don't want to go, I only have 15 minutes. I got a whole bunch to say. So because that was, at the time, it was the only thing that I could do. And because there were no clean time requirements. And so went to the first World Literature Committee and went back to Topeka, Kansas and started the Mid-America Regional Newsletter and did several issues of that. And that goes back to anybody can write. We're still writing. You know, there's no reason why you can't be involved in a project now. They've last year, they started doing a new meditation book. There's always going to be new literature coming out. And so there's always an opportunity for you to be involved. So, you know, a year passed and it was time for Lincoln. I was a college student and I spent my 18th birthday in treatment. So I was a college student. And so I just got in my car and drove to Lincoln, Nebraska. And I was there a few days late. So they sat me down. I was a typist, so they sat me down at those long tables. And that big building was like, you know, in the hallway of an old post office building. And so typed up those little snippets of information like they were showing us, you know, those handwritten scrawls on napkins and odd little pieces of paper. And that's what I did for, I don't know, 2 or 3 days, just typed. I'm just gonna hit the highlights. At Memphis, went to Memphis, showed up at Memphis, and what happened to me, I'm a college student, and I was walking across campus one day, and first of all, you have to understand is that I'm nuts. And I was still nuts. And so I was walking across campus and it's like I got this message, you know, God said, Linda, pack your bags, you're going to Memphis, Tennessee. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I got no money, I got no car, you know, I'm going to school on a grant, I live in the dorm, you know, how am I gonna get to Memphis, Tennessee? And the message I got back was, well, just take the steps, take the action, and it will happen. And so that's what I did. I talked to, you know, a couple of my friends. They said, here's 20 bucks, here's, you know, 25 bucks. And, you know, I was a resident assistant, and so they gave me an advance on my paycheck, and so I bought a bus ticket and went to Memphis, Tennessee. And and so I was a girl, and I was young, and so they decided I would be a good secretary. And so that was one of the things that I did was the secretary and take the minutes and take the notes and organize the typists and organize the files. And so that was part of the role that I played at Memphis. And like they have that big chalkboard in the back, you've seen some of the pictures and the check marks, was keeping track of where we were at with each of the chapters and what was going on with them, and just keeping things organized. And so after Memphis, we went to the World Service. Well, it was at the same time as the World Service Conference, the 4th conference was in Santa Monica, California. And that was an experience for me. And just like George was talking about taking the train, right? Day and a half on a train, I took a bus. You know, it took me like 40 hours on a bus to get out to California. And so we get out there, and I'd never been, you know, to California. And we stayed with some, oh God, I forget his name. Anyway, on Venice Beach, and would walk down the beach to the meeting place in Santa Monica. And they talked about the, that was the largest world literature conference, and part of that was because it was in California. People were out there for WSC, but it was not necessarily the most productive one. And so people were really excited about being in California, so they're always running off and going to meetings and doing things. And you know, we had people that came in and thought, you know, that because they had a lot of clean time or whatever, because maybe they worked in the Hollywood industry, that they were celebrities and they should be given special status. And it was like, no, we're all the same. You walk in the door, we're all the same. Nobody has any special privileges. But I was working really, really hard, and I ended up staying there at the whatever it was called, that the place we were at, for like 4 days, and slept in the bathroom. And it was horrible because the light was on. You couldn't turn the light off. But one night I'm there, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm working, and Greg Pierce was in the corner, and he woke up, and he said, you know, Linda, I used to be just like you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said, lonely. And it just broke my heart, you know. And he was right. But I kind of lived in my own little world, and he managed to touch me. And so that was one of the things that changed me. So some of the things that changed us, you know, were those experiences that we had with other people. And so I made an effort to try to come back and connect with other people. One of the things that happened after the Fourth World Literature Conference was that like the last version of the book got lost. And so when I showed up in Ohio, at the conference in Ohio, Bo took me inside and said, somebody lost a book, that's never happening again. He said, you're the librarian. And so they put me in this back room with Roy from Ohio. And, you know, we had like these 3 foot lockers, and you saw them in the in the pictures earlier, these 3 foot lockers full of files. And so they put me back there. And so we got this process now where everything had to be checked in and checked out, and just make sure that the files were okay, you know, that the book was safe. And so that became my job. And so after we left, and so the book stayed with me for the rest of the duration. So when we left Warren, Ohio, those foot lockers came back and sat in my living room. And so then when we went to Miami, you know, the foot lockers went down there. And then they came back with me. And so then when we went to Memphis, Tennessee for the conference to put together, you know, the approval form, I still had the foot lockers. And so a couple things happened at that event around Thanksgiving. Was someone from Topeka actually came with me. It's the first time anybody participated after the first conference, because we had people from Topeka at the first conference, if you look at that first row. And that was good. I had somebody to talk to, because that was one of the hard things about being a part of the literature movement, was I would go home and people couldn't relate to what I was saying or where I was coming from or that experience. Two, they actually started working on Just for Today at that event as well. And three, we had gotten the approval form, but we didn't have stories. And so that was one of the things that came out of that, was that we didn't have enough stories, and that the stories that we had weren't necessarily the best. And so on the bus ride home from Memphis, I wrote my story out in longhand and sent it in, Pothead.
Linda, you have 5 minutes remaining.
Okay. And so from Memphis, then went to the conference in not Philadelphia, but Pennsylvania, the story conference. And I was sick as a dog, got the flu, spent most of my time sick in bed. Then we went to the World Service Conference for the book to be approved. And I was lucky enough to be the alternate RSR for the Mid-America region when the book was approved. And, you know, we look at it now, we think, hey, it's a done deal. But my region, the Mid-America region, voted no. They didn't think the book was ready. And so it was really, really hard for me. I was on pins and needles going to that conference, like, you know, elbowing, you know, our RSRs, like, are you going to vote for it anyway? Are you going to vote for it anyway? How can you vote no? You know? And luckily he didn't, you know, he didn't have to come to that challenge. So then the other thing that happened after the World Service Conference is that Bo asked me to made arrangements with KB in Minnesota, and we took all those Foot Lockers to Minnesota, and she rented a copy machine, and I sat in her apartment for days copying every single piece of paper so that we had an extra copy of the book before we sent everything out to the World Service Conference. So by far, that was the thing that changed my life. Nothing else compares to it. And the thing that I want to share the story is, and it's been mentioned by several people about the joy and the sense of God that was there. And so you heard in that little clip that, you know, I had stayed up for like 42 hours. And at some point, you just have to stop. And so I left to go to a meeting and get sleep and get something to eat. And I remember coming back into the room at Memphis State University and walking in, and it was like walking into a room of warm butter, you know, and the feeling of God was so thick in the room that you could cut it with a knife. And at that point, I knew that there is a God, that he does love us, and he loved us enough to be there, to be a part of what was happening so that we could have a book. And that's the moment that I live in, you know. And so whenever I have any doubts that there is a God, I know, I never doubt, because I know, because I've been there and I've felt it. So it's just glad to be here, glad to be part of it. Thank you guys for putting this together. You've done an excellent, superb job. And we'll go on to the next.